Well, thank you everyone today for joining. It's certainly another exciting event, and Happy New Year to everybody that I haven't been able to say that to. Obviously, we're in the middle of February, and we're kind of kicking off the year with a really interesting program today. And thank you to Ed Buckley for stepping up in a big way and organizing this. So I will let Ed obviously talk and tee up the event. However, on the next slide, I just want to thank our sponsors. It wouldn't be possible to do the type of programming we've been able to do over the past few years now without them, right? So obviously Scott's Miracle Grow, Hickson Engineering and Architecture, Avuity, CBRE, Colliers, and WPS Global are all ongoing chapter sponsors at various different levels. We really appreciate obviously all their support. And obviously, it's also a great opportunity for different members here thinking about ways they can get involved with CoreNet to learn about sponsorship. So if anyone has any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, Melanie, or Heidi, our chapter administrator, about what different opportunities there might be. So after that brief commercial, Ed, I'm going to kick it over to you, allow you to kind of tee up this amazing event. And I'm looking forward to being an audience member here and listening from the great panel you've lined up today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrew, and welcome everybody. I'm a new member to the Cincinnati area, and I've been here for almost 2 years now, having moved up from the DFW area. One of my passions is technology in the workplace. Spent some time at Ericsson, very much focused on that, and I'm now at JLL, based here in the Cincinnati area. And so we have a really interesting program for you today. And just by way of introduction, the pandemic's entering its 3rd year. Who'd have thought that? We're seeing the waning of the recent Omicron surge, and are being told by the scientists and medical professionals that we should really plan for COVID to become endemic in the population, just like the common cold. So for more than 20 years, thought leaders in our industry have forecast major changes in the types, locations, configurations, and sizes of our workplaces with, frankly, very little change. Yet, in a little over 22 months, many aspects of how work is being done are no longer recognizable, and those changes may well be permanent. And so the workspace needs to catch up with the reality that is not going away. So today, we're going to explore 2 questions. The first of those is how to leverage technology to support a permanent hybrid workforce. And secondly, what are the technologies that our base buildings need to support changed workforce patterns and health needs? But first, I'd like to introduce to our 3 colleagues from the IFMA information technology community who are going to help us take a pragmatic approach to the ongoing hybrid workplace. And so our panelists here, we have Ted Ritter, who's worked and traveled extensively throughout North America, Europe, and Asia, and is the principal of LMI 360, a company that solely supports organizations that support the commercial built environment, and is co-founder of Draw Alert, a technology solution for improving results on construction projects. So how I know Ted is he's the chair of the IFMA Information Technology Community, and is also the incoming chair for IFMA America's Advisory Board and past president of the Phoenix chapter of IFMA, and a friend of mine for several years. And so Ted, just very briefly, what's your most and least favorite hybrid technology or hybrid supporting technology?
Sure, great question, Ed. Thanks for the intro. So I have an issue with Teams. I don't know what it is. It constantly has been the bane of my existence for the last 3 years. And I think, in terms of favorite, because it's so portable and there's, so much available, is my iPhone is probably my favorite technology.
Great. Thank you very much. And let's move over to Colette Temmick, who's currently serves as Chief Strategy and Product Officer at Blue Sky IBE. Blue Sky IBE provides FM advisory services and facilities performance management technology, which helps to keep real estate organizations maximize the performance of their teams, properties, portfolios, and ESG programs. Colette brings incredible experience from Cushman & Wakefield, the Apollo Education Group, and roles in Boeing and Oracle. And Colette is also a board member of the IFMA overall organization and a member of the information technology community. So Colette, your favorite and least favorite hybrid working technologies?
I'd say least favorite, it's probably a user issue. So I don't have too many least favorite. I would say favorite right now has just been Zoom, because it's enabled all of us to connect during this time.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. And I know we're going to be talking more about Zoom and those types of technologies soon. So Peter, given the challenges that we've had earlier, I'm sure your least favorite is going to be Zoom as we move into this. But Peter is the director at ROI Consulting Group, has got more than 17 years experience at helping organizations apply technology to more effectively manage their real estate portfolios. So he's seen these changes more than most. He's got a unique blend of experiences in hardware, software, digital twins, IoT, compliance, and facilities management. So very, very broad technology experience there. Also a member of the IFMA technology community. So Peter, your most and least favorite hybrid supporting technology?
My least favorite is anything like this that involves a screen. I believe that people are social people, and this is starting to have a big impact on us. And if anyone logged on earlier, I couldn't get my camera to work. My most favorite is the IoT devices that are starting to be used for occupancy, because I think IoT is going to play more and more over time and in our world. And one of the interesting things about the pandemic, I think it brought the use of occupancy sensors up, and we're seeing faster adoption of that than we would have otherwise.
Excellent, thank you. And just to close out there, I'd say my most favorite is my trusty iPad that I think I've worn out the touchscreen on it now. My least favorite, as you may see on here, is lighting. It seems to be a real struggle to actually get good lighting for folks on these conferences. And I think it was an interesting point you raised there, Peter. There's been some research that actually video conferencing can at times detract from teamwork, and it's and people miss the vocal intonations when they're actually on a screen versus that conference with the cameras being turned off. So let's get straight into it. And first off, we're seeing increased democratization of the workplace, as can be seen from this slide. So just like electricity in the 1920s, remote work is becoming ubiquitous. I'll just pause there. Who'd have thought that we actually had an electricity department a little over a century ago? I think that's pretty amazing. And it's no longer special. Employees are increasingly driving their own experience. So Peter, maybe you can kick us off with an example of the questions that you're being asked now versus before the pandemic that reflect changing demand on your clients from their workforce and customers.
So a few things, and I'll kind of start pre-pandemic because it tees it up well. Pre-pandemic, and I used to joke about this, as if we think about it, the workspaces for people were getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I had taken a picture of an office in a submarine I was at once and posted it out on a blog, because it literally was like this little closet. And I wondered where that was going. As the pandemic came in, we've definitely shifted from putting more people in less space as we've looked at things like social distancing. But one of the trends that's gone is, towards how we were using the office. It's kind of like a new office as we look towards neighborhood and team space. But a few things. I was on a roundtable with a bunch of our clients last week talking about how they saw space and what they were doing. And by far and away, most of them were cutting space, no rocket science. A lot of them were shedding satellite office, and many of them were moving towards short-term leases. And I think that's part of the trend as we look at this. We're not sure necessarily what the new normal is going to become. As we look at space, though, utilizations become more important. So room reservation systems are a lot more heavily used now, not only to see and schedule your time in, but also to make people sure that people are showing up and using their space, where the IoT devices are coming in. As we think about space, though, the office used to be a place that we'd collaborate and we'd have our heads down work. And where we look now, we see that when you're at home, it's a really good place to do your heads down work. But as you head towards the office, you're going to want to do more collaboration. So the nature of the spaces that we've gone into have changed. An example of that, if we think about conference rooms, right? Usually pre-pandemic, we'd go in and you'd have a speakerphone and you might have some people come on. Now you're seeing that in most conference rooms, a lot of organizations have invested in webcams that can pick up not just one person, but the people in the room. And they've also upgraded the audio equipment so they have kind of a better look and feel. As we talk about space, one of the big questions are, you know, how do I create an environment that has collaboration because people are working alone off-site? Last thing I'll mention that was kind of interesting, the Wall Street Journal had an article on February 10th called The Offsite is the New On-Site. And it was very interesting. And it said, you know, that traditionally an offsite was an annual event and it might be at a spa or a nice location. But as organizations, some have completely closed their offices and people are going in more. Also, offsite locations are becoming important places to collaborate. And one of the things that was kind of talked about that, and it ties into this whole concept of collaboration and team building, was in that article, Brent Hyder, who I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, is the Chief People Officer at Salesforce, said something that was interesting with results to what they were doing at Salesforce in terms of getting people to collaborate this new normal. And he said the number one danger to Salesforce and other companies in the hybrid work environment is that people are going to become disengaged with the culture of the company. So just a couple thoughts there for you, Ed.
There's a lot to unpack in all of that, and maybe to Colette. So we heard about actually this very specific article on the screen here. So Colette, what is the role of the office, and how much do you believe that the offsite is really the new return to office, and that our offices are going to become like clubhouses?
Yeah, so and that's probably one extreme view, right? But having social connections at work is important. And I think, you know, being able to collaborate, you know, enhance teamwork, and also the office is part of the retention equation in the type of space that we're providing. And so without this social structure, employees might find it easy to move to a new job. So think about it, the old quote, why people leave their job for various reasons, but they stay because of their coworkers and peers. And so that social connection is very important, and how companies think about providing that along with other types of spaces. I think, you know, real estate departments have been studying productivity and types of space and how people work and how to enable that for quite some time, certainly for the last few decades. But they can't ignore that the office is a social place, and how do they continue to support that and enable productivity in various work environments? So is it a combination of providing lab space, areas that maybe a lounge or type of clubhouse where people can connect on their breaks, but suggesting that there's only one solution ignores how people work. It ignores all the other types of space where people need to be productive. They want to learn when they come to the office. They want to collaborate. They want to connect. And in addition to that, there's still the company culture and how to enable that and providing that to the employees. So it's interesting. So if you think about hybrid work, now we're finding that large companies, small companies can now start hiring from different geographical locations that they haven't been able to in the past, or didn't feel they were able to do it, and have rethought that value proposition. And so now that pool of talent has more options across a larger swath of organizations. And so it's going to be imperative for many companies to think about that talent and retaining that talent and really providing environments that support that talent. And whether that be that talent's coming in to meet with a team and collaborate, or how do they stay connected in a virtual environment, all of that has to come together. But I think to assume that it's just one type of space will ignore how to support employees and how to create that kind of competitive advantage for organizations going forward. So I do think that it needs to promote socialization, but it also needs to promote various types of work.
Great, thank you, Colette. And I think where you're heading with that is a great segue into the idea of technology. That if our clients are seeking to recruit in different locations, it means that the face-to-face get-together is going to become rarer. So the technology in the workplace is going to become more important. I was on a video conference not that long ago that really just involved two organizations crossing, and we actually had two people who were in the same building where they couldn't get the technology to work, and so they actually wound up in two separate rooms, effectively video conferencing from the same office and kind of waving through the adjoining window at each other, which is clearly an example of the workplace not supporting the new hybrid working. So Ted, I know you've got a lot of experience in this area. So how do we ensure that technology takes into account the different experience that people are going to have in the office, in the third place, like a Starbucks or some other WeWork or other type of environment, and at home? Essentially, how from a technology perspective can we ensure there's an equity in terms of the experience of our clients' workforce?
Great question. And the short answer, we can't do it 100%, but how can we do it best is, I think, really what I've been thinking about. So for example, our little company abandoned our traditional office last April and went 100% to WeWork. Some of the things, Colette was saying and you were saying about, how do we make sure things work? If you're going to, go towards that, co-working, make sure you know what the Wi-Fi bandwidth availability really is. And I think that's really the key. I mean, whatever platform you like to use, I mean, whether it's Zoom or something else, or you're doing video conferencing, I mean, the core of all of it is, do you have the right level of bandwidth or not? And the answer is not going to be same everywhere, but think about it as like just another checklist item in terms of, okay, if I'm at WeWork, I know that I'm pretty stable. If I'm at Starbucks, I'm not quite as stable. If I'm at the right airport lounge, I'm going to have great bandwidth. And if I'm in the general airport area, it's not going to be pretty. It's just not. I think looking at how we provide that equity, especially for flexible hybrid workers, partially at home, partially in an office, is, I mean, again, back to the beginning of the pandemic, we had all kinds of issues with people at home. The residential bandwidth was insufficient to support this kind of conversation. That's changed to a certain extent. Are we looking at, from a IT, FM, HR perspective, to say, okay, so, do you have that minimum level bandwidth, regardless of whatever the platform is? The other factor is it easy to connect? I mean, Peter, you had issues this morning connecting, and it's happened to all of us. I know that having worked out of, 4 different WeWork locations now, it just works. Walk in, whether it's phone or tablet or laptop, it just works. I know going from certain, so I'll do a plug here, airport lounge to airport lounge, the same Wi-Fi password applies, and it's easy. Same for Starbucks. I mean, I don't have to re-log in. It just knows that I've done it once, and so I can go from space to face. I think, making it convenient and easy, but I think we also need to say, hey, I'm sorry, if you're at that lower end of the bandwidth, you might need to turn your camera off and just listen a little bit harder to that intonality.
I think those are great points, Aaron. And what really resonates with me is that you were not talking about the latest and greatest video technology, bringing in these, I guess, was it the metaverse type spaces and that type of thing, and everything that goes with it. Your comments were very much about the pragmatics of ensuring that people can get up and running and they have good bandwidth and the communication can actually occur. So Peter, this is a real specialism of yours, so I wondered if you wouldn't mind adding some color to that or any alternative thoughts.
I apologize, speaking of communication, I was on mute. My one thought in all of this is that it's kind of partially a moving target. If we think about some of this going back to the office and working together, when we were all scared during the pandemic, part of getting us back in the office was the whole concept of making us feel safe. We've seen over the last couple months, a couple weeks, actually significant scale backs in masks and social distancing and things like that. But I think that the pandemic will continue to go and we'll learn how to live with it. I think that will have one impact. The other thing, I think, I've worked out of the house now for 18 years. And so I know what it's like to want to be with people. I think we're going to see a shift in a couple years where even though we're moving away from the office, people are going to want more and more to go back, because part of it is, technology aside, we're social beings. We want to spend time together, and that's how we work best.
Great, thank you. So coming from the technologist, the face-to-face interaction is most definitely not dead. So I've got a follow-up question to Colette based on a conversation that we had in the preparation for this. So much of the communications are becoming asynchronous. So for example, email, Slack, Teams, where a conversation takes place over an extended period of time and we don't actually need to be interacting directly. And that used to be, and so that obviously used to be email, with now very many new technologies coming in. And synchronous, which used to be primarily face-to-face or telephone, and is now very much the Zoom experience that you mentioned earlier. So this was a temporary, or we thought this was a temporary phenomena just during the pandemic, but it's now probably becoming permanent. So how are you advising your clients to plan for that?
It's a great question. So if you think about both concepts, right, they happen whether you're working at home or you're in the office. So if you're working at home, you're certainly collaborating with other individuals via Zoom. If you're working in the office, you may just be answering email. So it's interesting that technology is fluid, irrespective of kind of the work environment. But you know, COVID-19 has provided companies with the opportunity to take at least take significant steps in adopting new technologies. So for example, you know, we've all had the pleasure of working on Zoom or webinar, whether that's your favorite technology or not, but certainly collaborating across these technologies. You know, in addition, we've used platforms as Google, you know, Dropbox and others, you know, cloud technologies to share documents, work together on documents. And then we've certainly used chat, messenger, and others just to stay connected to our peers. So some of us have used that before the pandemic, and some certainly during and after. So lots of technologies are enabling us to work in these different environments and coming up to speed with those. But it's interesting, this also kind of renews the concept of companies either trying to preserve or modernize their corporate cultures and measuring productivity. And in some cases, you know, is this actually enhancing or impacting their existing operating models? So if the nature of work is changing and we're seeing automation or digital transformation, we've all heard how many companies, you know, these large percentage of companies that are going through digital transformation. Shouldn't this really impact, or will it impact how companies operate, but then in turn, how they're structured? And so when we have conversations with our clients, you know, these new types of spaces that are being designed, built, and then managed going forward, it also really brings along new technologies, right? So think about conference rooms and the new technologies that are going to be rolled out, and how employees are going to be using these technologies for asynchronous or synchronous type of work. We're thinking about how are we going to deliver that? And do we have the talent in our organizations to do that? And to assume that our old CRE structures that we've had for decades are going to enable our success in the new environment might be challenging. So when we have discussions with our clients, it's really around what is the right operating model going forward to enable your success. And that looks at, you know, the talent you have in your organization, the structure, the people, the processes, and the technology. And you're going to be managing different environments. You're going to be asked to move at a faster pace. You are going to have a seat at the table and enable productivity and having probably visibility that you haven't had in the past. But with that also brings opportunity, and you need to be structured for success to answer that call when your company's asking you to participate in that.
Great, thanks, Colette. And two immediate reactions to that. One is, I think our audience, and I know most of our industry, very, very different places in terms of actually handling and trying to get their arms around this. The client that I currently support, their R&D sites, they really did not close down. And so we were very much trying to manage through and take some of these technologies on real time and incorporate them into the workplace as our clients actually almost as we go figuring things out, because they had pretty significant groups that had to be near their labs. And then we have other organizations that, quite frankly, are not addressing this at all yet. They've probably got the home working, let's say the remote work piece, because their offices are still shut down. And I saw in the real estate press that a couple of other firms, even though the Omicron wave is starting to decline, they've put off the return to office yet again. So I think this is going to be a process that is probably going to extend for for maybe a few years, especially as we start getting into capital planning. I actually found this really neat article that I recommend everybody has a crack at from Harvard Business Review, which to your point, Colette, I think speaks to the need for being planful about the return to office, and actually having an office and technologies that, as the article says, people want to come back to. This was actually about an architectural practice that got caught right at the start of an assignment or a commission with their client, and their client wished to go ahead. So I'd like to just pause for a few moments and ask our panel some of the items that we should be looking at maybe in addition or reinforced within this article around technology and workplace technology in particular to create that office that people want to come back to. So Ted, maybe you first could weigh in with how can we be more planful about workplace technologies that create an environment that people want to engage with?
You know, have to feel safe, has to be easy. I think I said earlier, you know, it has to be ubiquitous. You know, does it work when I get there? If it's mixed mode, it's going to be confusing. There needs to be, you know, standards established, but there needs to be consensus to build those standards. It's not a top-down decision, in my opinion. I think there needs to be, you know, good engagement with the team, with the employees, to say, hey, this is how we, you know, communicate. If you have a better suggestion, tell us, but this is what we've decided on as a group. I think, you know, one of the things that, you know, Peter brought up earlier in terms of, you know, video conferencing, as opposed to what we're doing now, it's different. And I think, you know, one of the things that, you know, we've been looking at is how do we make that easier for people, because it can be very intimidating compared to what we've gotten used to on Zoom or, you know, other similar platforms.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ted. Colette, same question.
I would echo what Ted said. You know, it's going to be interesting to see if some of these collaborative technologies that definitely have to be easy to use, right? How many times have we walked into a conference room and struggle with where's the cord or why isn't the projector not working? only to have a group frustrated or waste time, at least for the first part of the meeting. But it'll be interesting, as we try to connect individuals in really enabling the entire meeting of participants to feel included, whether these technologies are going to kind of morph to really enable managers. So if you think about a technology saying, the meeting is going well, there's so many minutes, you're tracking all the metrics, but then they say there's probably 1 or 2 participants that haven't connected or haven't said anything or haven't come off of mute. So it'd be interesting if you'll see technologies now try to support that productivity or support that inclusivity into the meetings.
Okay, thank you. And Peter, you're our IoT expert on the panel here. How can we make use of Internet of Things type technologies, sensors, wide area controllers, panels, etc., to create that environment that people would like to engage with?
I think a big part of how they're going to be used, if we think about the office moving more towards the collaborative environment, the question is, who's there? And also, where are they? So it used to be that you could go see John Doe and you knew where his office was. As people are moving towards more shared and scheduling space, that the problem is, where is he? When you used to go walk down to someone's office. So one of the ways I think IoT devices are going to help is they're going to help determine who's in the office and where they are, which will in turn help the collaboration in order to direct people towards each other.
Great, thank you. And so just a quick recap there. To create that technology environment, it needs to be easier to engage with. So as it becomes ubiquitous, that comment at the start that this is really just being seen as another utility, the technology in the workplace. So it just needs to work, and we need to be careful about the downtime that people have, especially if they're using something that's unfamiliar to them. Around meeting management, I think that was an interesting comment that the technologies actually do have the capabilities today to let you know what's going on in that meeting and for it to become a facilitation tool. And then this idea of using what are pretty ubiquitous, I think, sensors or of the availability of sensors to figure out who is there and where are they. So I know from a personal perspective, the idea of moving from schedule-based services to demand-based services, that's probably the biggest area that I find myself looking at, both from an efficiency perspective, because I think that our clients and our internal clients, our external clients will continue to expect things to be done better, faster, cheaper. But we've wrung out a lot of the benefits or a lot of the opportunities from the old paradigm, and we need to use technology to help our services. So from where are they? If somebody orders lunch, something as simple as ordering lunch, well, where does that lunch get delivered when we don't actually know where the person is? So I think that those are great comments there. So just for the more general audience, hopefully you can hear from the panel that a lot of the issues range across different workplace technologies and not specific to any one or the other. So I'm not sure that we're going to get very many, if any, recommendations on a specific technology today, much more about the pragmatic approach that we need to take as we're engaging with this new workplace. And the workplace is the place that work happens, but that occurs inside an envelope of a building. And I read an article here in the Washington Post. It was actually very late last year, December 15th, from Joe Allen, one of the authors of the book that you can see here over on the left, and also created this chart over on the right-hand side about minimizing health risk in the workplace. And that opinion piece is that our playbook to fight COVID-19 is outdated. There are 10 updates for 2022. And some of the things that Joe Allen spoke about included that being fully vaccinated means you've received a booster shot. Stop equating all control strategies. Hand washing, while a good health practice isn't as effective as getting vaccinated. Ventilation still matters. There'll continue to be breakthroughs, but good ventilation and filtration can help prevent an infectious person from spreading the virus to others simultaneously across the room. A lot about mandates, reduction in isolation periods, how to deal with quarantine, really showing that even over these past couple of years, our thoughts about how to control the coronavirus, and indeed what does a healthy building mean, has developed considerably over a very short period. So Peter, if I could return to you, because your work is bringing you into the area of healthy buildings, maybe you can share some thoughts of the factors that you think are going to shape the healthy buildings agenda over the next few years, and how technology might be able to help with that.
So as we think about, a new focus on the office and things like that, there's a realization that environments are really important to us psychologically. And I kind of talked earlier, part of the thing in the get back to work in the pandemic was to make sure that people felt safe. But as you think about it, also, there are other things that are important, like air quality, like light and things like that. So as we take a look at that, I think that's all going to become increasingly more important. From a technology perspective, I think we're going to see a couple impacts. The first, I think we're going to improve on video conferencing. So if you look at my screen, you'll notice that I have a fish tank behind me. And I like having my fish tank, and I got it once the pandemic started because I don't like the fake backgrounds because they kind of muzzle your head. And it always kind of gives me a conversation starter. Also, we know with things like this, I've just blurred the background so I could look more professional than having my fish tank. The other thing is, we're talking about this, and some of this is very low technology. I think we're going to see people utilizing standing desks more at home. You talk differently when you sit. So sometimes when I present, I stand. Other things, which again, low technology, but makes a difference. If I take my blur off, you'll notice that over here, I've got a whiteboard. So sometimes instead of using like a word on a screen, I might turn my camera so I can kind of do some stuff like that. As we look, I think air quality is going to become increasingly more important. I don't think it's just a pandemic issue. I know personally, I had toxic mold in my house. It got into my body. I'm intimately acquainted with how that can impact things. I touched earlier on the whole concept of where people are. And, if I could joke, it's kind of like a where's Waldo? Your colleagues in the office, but I think that that's going to become important as well. I also think that we'll start to see some augmented reality and virtual reality come into this. Personally, even though I'm a technologist, I want to talk to a person face to face. So I hope that doesn't take off everything. But as we look, you're going to see all sorts of IoT sensors that are deeper and deeper in the world. So you kind of are seeing the first generation, which are occupancy sensors, which are helping with, hey, someone's scheduled to come into the office. Did they actually come? Do we have too many people in the office? And you can also use that to determine what needs to be cleaned as we look at this, because we've got to do more cleaning. From a conference room perspective, we've got sensors now to say, hey, did people show up? How many people showed up? So do I have the right mix of conference rooms? Do I need larger and smaller? So it helps give an indication of space. And as IoT devices come down, I think we're going to see devices with all sorts of use case, where I kind of talked about air quality and reservations and cleaning and conference rooms. But I think there's going to be a whole host of applications to help track what's going on in the building, help us be in a safe environment, and help us collaborate with one another.
Great, thanks, Peter. And I think your comments line up with a lot of surveys. I managed to grab just this one from Vedantics here, where I think a survey that was carried out December 2021, the top 3 factors shaping healthy buildings agenda, 90% said indoor air quality. So if you don't know what a MERV is, you probably want to go look that up. And in addition, start figuring out that a higher MERV when you get to a certain point isn't necessarily better, because it'll cause your HVAC equipment to run pretty poorly. Occupancy management was in there at 63%. Mental health, I heard you mention the mental health, and certainly having that fish tank in the background. I apologize to everybody if you heard some dogs barking. My social support animals came back from their work and tried to knock me off my chair. Cleaning, 24%. Again, user control. We heard that a little bit earlier. User control of the internal environment, 24% there. COVID-19 measures are actually now down at 22%. Clearly, we're seeing that transition towards more of a general view around health. And then the next one down was security at 12%. So, Colette, with your daily work assisting corporate clients, are you seeing an increase in focus from your clients on the healthy building side on real estate, or is that yet to work its way through?
Absolutely. I think it's been top of mind for many of us, right? Certainly health over the last few years. But I would say, first and foremost, it's indoor air quality. It's, if you think about oxygen and our cognitive abilities, really that seems to be people trying to understand, what does that mean? How much outside ventilation? How does that then impact my environment, my energy and environmental scores? But really providing that healthy environment. And you talked about, Joe Allen, certainly the 9 foundations of a healthy building. And that includes ventilation, air quality, water, moisture, noise, and lighting, right? You need even access to direct light. So I think all of those things companies are thinking about in terms of certainly their new space design, but also their existing. How do I improve ventilation? How do I work with landlords if I'm in lease space to make sure that I have a healthy building? We're seeing an uptick in the WELL certifications for some of these spaces, and that brings together some of these concepts as well.
Okay, great, thank you. And I think it's definitely driving the agenda. And we have our IFMA colleagues on today chatting with a CoreNet audience, because it does go across our entire industry, which Ted, you spent a long time with IFMA. You've partnered with CoreNet over many years. I wonder if you could share with the audience how the research agenda is changing in both organizations as we largely respond to the realization that what we thought was going to be temporary about a couple of years ago is very much changing the way that we need to look at our buildings and our workplace as we go forward.
Great question. And yeah, it's been a great collaboration over the years. I think, looking at, what we as IFMA did initially, which was, let's get the best and brightest together to talk about the shift in the workplace, those shifts in technologies. Healthy building, certainly part of it. The expert assessment series, was a kind of a living, breathing 12-month development cycle, bringing thought leadership globally. I think, beyond that, I think, everybody's pretty much agreed that we're not quite there yet. We've done a lot. We need to re-quantify what we have as new standards. I think the integration of the communication tools was something that was not on the radar 2 years ago. That's front and center now, because if we can't collaborate, we can't communicate, we can't be efficient, we can't do our job. That's new. What does that new standard look like? What does the talent gap look like? Thinking about 2.5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, starting to have a conversation is we need a technologist that is inside the FM or CRE department. We can't simply rely on IT because they're so broad-based. They're really the utility. They're not the power user that's needed. And I think that is something that, from a talent gap perspective, what belongs in CRE and FM departments now has to include, that technology resource that can interface with technology vendors, the IT department, and ensure the best outcomes for the team. I think, looking at some of the initiatives that are in play right now is, what are the emerging technologies? What do we have stabilized now, but what are the emerging technologies? Because as, we started the whole conversation, decades happened in 3 weeks. What is emerging, would typically, before the pandemic be a 2, 3 to 5 year cycle, maybe a 6-month cycle now. So we need to marry up what is current best practice or available and affordable to what's likely to be here in 6 months, that we need to be aware of. Referring back to, the healthy building, so I'm looking at the slide, I think we really need to look at, do we have healthy home environments for, millions and millions of workers around the world? To the IoT point that Peter's, kind of touched on a couple different times and from our prep calls, I don't know, sensors are really cheap now. And in terms of that indoor air quality, or what is the, what are the attributes? Because, when the pandemic started, we didn't think about any of that. We just sent people on the way, you got to go home. But we need to think about it now. So I think that's the other, research that's being done is, how do we level out that experience for the, flex, hybrid, or fully dedicated home worker? Do we have everything set up right? And how do we monitor that versus, for example, the 2 days they're actually in an office? So we'll see a lot of white papers, and I think a lot of future thought leadership coming out from both associations during the course of 2022.
Great, thank you, Ted. And as you were chatting there, I was thinking about the work that's taking place and the various working groups that are looking at even the ISO standards. I think ISO 48000, I think is the facilities management standard, and we have ISO 55000, which is the asset management standard. Both of which probably 2 years ago were nice to talk about, were somewhat academic and off on the side, but are now actually becoming very much the foundation for us to have commonality across the industry and to be able to engage appropriately with all of these technologies. So yeah, I think that quote, it definitely does feel like, to me personally, that I'm seeing decades happening in a matter of weeks, and quite frankly, at times, it's a challenge to keep up. Now, talking of decades and weeks, we're seeing an increase, so I should say a reduction in cycle time around decision making and implementation. So I have a quick fire question just to close us out here. So much of our response is going to require capital dollars to be spent over several years because we still depreciate over 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So question for each of you, where do you recommend that we prioritize our capital dollars when retrofitting an office to support health and wellness needs? So I'm going to come back to you, Ted, to kick that one off. Just a very quick fire there. Where should we be focused on that initial capital investment?
I think indoor air quality first, and that can't really be done without the correct adjustment to the building control systems and perhaps extending out the IoT infrastructure.
Okay, great, thank you. Colette?
I would say the same, indoor air quality, and then I would say lighting. Those two being first and foremost.
Right, thank you. And Peter?
Yeah, from my perspective, again, because it was personal, I'd say indoor air quality. And also, while we think about things from a corporate real estate and technology perspective, HR is going to be pushing a better place to work. So I think there'll be a double take for the indoor air quality. I think you'll see a push from facilities as well as a push from HR.
Great, thank you. And so I think all this leaves me to do is to thank our panelists for a great discussion over the past 55 minutes. We'll try and let people get away a little bit early here. I see we have some messages in the chat, which I will try to, I'll actually just try to pick up those. Oh, that was Dean Stanberry 41,000. I got that wrong. So thank you, Dean Stanbury, for correcting me there. It's 41,000. And I don't see we have any questions there, but
Well,
Ed,
oh. I wanted to just step in really quick and thank everybody, but also, and I apologize, I have to give a shameless plug. Obviously, for anyone that's not a CoreNet member, please think about joining. Obviously, if you want to enjoy great content like this on a consistent basis, we have an amazing lineup this year. And so please, CoreNetGlobal.org. You can find out more information. Obviously, reach out to any of the chapter members on the IKO site. We'd be happy to talk to you about the opportunities that membership brings. In addition, I want to give a huge thank you. And if we were in person, I would demand a standing ovation and a round of applause for the panel. And thank you, Ed, for putting this amazing event together. I learned a lot today, and I know everyone else did too.
Great, thank you, Andrew. So hopefully we met the objective of, in my papers here, it's down here somewhere, but the objectives of looking at technology and workplace change itself, and the buildings that our workplaces are in. So just want to echo Andrew's comments about the panel. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Colette. Thank you, Peter, for joining us. It's a huge favor to come in and chat with the IKO chapter of CoreNet. And it just leaves me to wish everybody a great rest of the week and have a very safe 2022. Thank you all.